Welcome to Inside the Issues. I am Amrit Singh. Soon after President Trump won the 2024 election, Governor Gavin Newsom called a special legislative session to prepare for the possibility of lawsuits between California and the new administration. And lawsuits we have seen, with California Attorney General Rob Bonta filing and co-filing litigation challenging Trump executive orders on birthright citizenship and transgender care for minors, in addition to a memo from Trump's Office of Management and Budget, which sought to temporarily freeze federal loans and grants. More recently, Bonta has filed suit challenging the Trump administration's cut to medical research funding and the so-called Department of Government Efficiency's access to sensitive Treasury Department materials. Federal judges have granted temporary restraining orders and preliminary injunctions in all of those cases. In addition to all of that, Bonta has been prosecuting the case against rent gougers following the LA fires. It's a heavy load, and somehow California Attorney General Rob Bonta finds the time to join me now in studio. Attorney General, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming in. It's great to have you.
Honored to be here, Amrit. Thank you.
Between the Constitution and the memos and Zillow, you got plenty of reading material. You chose not to run for governor and run again for Attorney General. Clearly, you got your work cut out for you.
I'm grateful for this job and this role. It's always been an important job, tackling all the issues that are important to Californians, oftentimes to Americans, and even others around the world, and even more so now as we confront the Trump administration's violations of the law, his lack of fidelity to the rule of law, violations of the Constitution, as we do all the things that we were doing before, enhancing public safety, increasing housing, maximizing access to health care, protecting constitutional rights, civil rights, consumer rights. So we got our hands full, and I love it all. We're ready for anything and everything we need to do to advance California and protect Californians.
Well, you mentioned a lot of big issues there, and let's just start by talking about one of the most recent lawsuits you filed and received a temporary restraining order on, and that is this policy statement from the National Institutes of Health that would cut funding to medical research institutions, something called the indirect cost rate, which they would bring down to 15%. That would affect the CSU system, this UC system in California. Talk about what the indirect cost rate is and talk about your legal case here.
Yeah, first of all, I mean, this is something that we saw under Trump 1.0. He tried to do this exact same thing, reduce the indirect cost rate, payments to something unilaterally across the board.
And explain what that is, the indirect cost rate.
Indirect costs are the costs of research associated with sort of the ecosystem backbone and infrastructure of research, the lab costs, the staff costs, the utilities costs that provide the opportunity to do research. Direct costs are for the grant for a specific purpose. Maybe it's Alzheimer's research or cancer research. But you need the lab, you need the staff, you need the utilities to do the research. So this is how we advance humanity. This is how we take on some of the biggest challenges like cancer, like Alzheimer's. You need to invest in research, and the president cannot unilaterally slash the funding. Congress specifically said he can't do it. There's a congressional act that says he can't. He's violated that. If he wants to propose cuts, he needs to go through a process called the Administrative Procedures Act. You need to have notice and comment. You need to have reasons that aren't arbitrary and capricious. You need to have the authority to do it. He's violated all of that, and it's not just me saying it. A court agreed with us within hours, and now, right now, there is a pause nationwide on all this slashing and reduction of costs of funding for NIH. From NIH.
Right, and the pause comes as a temporary restraining order. In part, the court is saying this could create some irreparable harm to these institutions because they didn't have time to really get their minds around this pause in funding.
It was overnight.
And the Trump administration would say, though, to some of this, that the NIH does have the authority to make this kind of change because it's not a significant change, it's an alteration within the auspices of like what the NIH can do for their own policies, and also that indirect costs is about overhead more. And again, they're talking a lot about efficiency, and we'll talk about some of the lawsuits that you filed there too. What do you say to that it's really about the building and not about the actual research, and we want to really just fund the research?
Yeah, I mean, you need the infrastructure, you need the staff, you need the lab to do the research. It doesn't happen without it. So it's all semantics, but these are real investments in research, and he is entitled to make whatever arguments he wishes. He made them to the court. The court didn't agree. And so he unfortunately has had a problem following the law, following the Constitution. Mr. Trump wants to do what he wants, when he wants, how he wants, even if it violates the Constitution, which is very unfortunate. We have the rule of law. He needs to follow it, and we're going to make sure he does.
And the courts are going to weigh in on the legality of what they're trying to do or not. The Administrative Procedure Act, as you say, and we'll see. Temporary restraining order is there. And you had said that I will be closely monitoring to ensure that the Trump administration follows this court order on the temporary restraining order. And you say that about this and the funding here for the indirect costs. But there's also a reason that you're saying that because with the lawsuit that you filed about federal loans and grants, you received temporary restraining order in there, and you filed suit, amongst others, to say some of these groups are not getting the loans and grants that the court ordered the Trump administration to resume. What's happened there? What groups haven't been getting them? And what happens if they continue to not provide those funds?
Yeah, multiple states brought a case in the District of Rhode Island challenging an Office of Management and Budget, OMB, memo that sought overnight to pause and stop $3 trillion worth of national funding. We went in, we got a broad order restraining that pause on funding, and there was some areas of funding where the pause continued, and we thought it was in violation of the order. It was funding related to the Inflation Reduction Act, funding related to the Infrastructure Act, and so we brought a motion to enforce an existing court order and ensure that it applied to those two areas of funding, the IRA and the Infrastructure Act. And the court agreed with us, and we got that order. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, maybe there was a need for court clarity. That court clarity has been provided now, and so we fully expect the Trump administration to comply.
Another lawsuit that you filed was on some executive actions that would give access to the so-called Department of Government Efficiency to these sensitive Treasury Department materials. Just talk about how you view this, why you filed the suit, and what you're asking for.
This was a remarkable situation where Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, had access to the Treasury payment system with sensitive information for millions of Americans, things like their Social Security number, their bank account. The intended purpose for the access was to slash and burn some of the funding for federal programs and services. And these are critical services to individuals that are provided through the Treasury payment system, like veterans benefits, Social Security, Medicare payments. Federal employees get paid through there. Americans get their tax refunds from the federal government through this system. It's also critical for payments to states. We get child care payments, health care payments, education, infrastructure, public safety grants, all come through there. And Mr. Musk, who not a single person voted for, had access to the sensitive information, and it was unlawful. There was no process that was appropriately gone through. Again, the Administrative Procedures Act. Right. We believe there was a violation of the separation of powers because Congress is who appropriates funds and has the spending power. The articulated reason for DOGE's access was to block funding, and there's also a lot of privacy concerns that we think were violated, or privacy rights that were violated, and the take care clause of the Constitution in that regard was triggered. So we brought that case to a court. They found in favor of us within hours as well, halting Mr. Musk's access to the payment system, and the private information, confidential, proprietary, sensitive information of Americans is not for Trump to share or for Mr. Musk to mine. It doesn't matter how many businesses you started or how rich you are. You got to follow the law, and we ensure that was happening here.
In the temporary restraining order you received on the NIH medical funding suit, there was less said by the judge about the probable legalities when I looked at that order. But in this one, the judge did say that the states showed the likelihood of success on the merits. There's irreparable harm, which is the reason for the injunction, and also that this could potentially result in the disclosure of sensitive materials, and also that the system would be more vulnerable to hacking. So all these things is what you laid out. I will say that the Trump administration has responded to some of this as well, and the White House spokesperson, Principal Deputy Press Secretary Harrison Field, said, I'd like to have you respond to this. He said, instead of working to become the party that focuses on the will of the people, they're hell-bent on keeping their heads in the sand and gaslighting on the widely supported mission of DOGE, slashing waste, fraud, and abuse, becoming better stewards of the American taxpayers' hard-earned dollars may be a crime to Democrats, but it's not a crime in the court of law.
I don't think they have a finger on the pulse on that one. We got thousands of emails and calls, and when talking to other attorneys general across the country, they got the same from Americans up in arms, worried, concerned, anxious, asking appropriately, why does Elon Musk have access to their private information? That sounds like someone who just doesn't understand where the people are at. They do not want someone who's unelected, Mr. Musk, just because he's rich or started companies, to have access to their private information. We got that input, we got that those calls, and we made our case, our legal case, to a neutral arbiter. We won. We have the restraining order. So, this is all spin. This is all their attempts to create a different perception of what actually happened. But it's unfortunate that there's been attempts to go down the lane of misinformation and disinformation instead of truth. I think Americans deserve to be told the truth. Mr. Musk, who shouldn't have had access to their private information, had access to it. We said it was against the law. It's not for us to decide. A court does, and they agreed with us. So that's really the beginning and the end of it.
Well, there's a lot of lawsuits, as I mentioned, and you received essentially temporary restraining orders or blocks and preliminary injunctions on all of them that you filed so far, including the one against birthright citizenship, the
right.
executive order against birthright citizenship and transgender care for minors. What else are you looking at? And you and I have talked about the fact that you have to wait till things become ripe before you actually file suit. But what are some other issues, executive orders and beyond, that California's looking at that way?
Yeah, I think it's super important to just put a point of emphasis on the fact that when the attorneys general move, when we move in unison, when the California Attorney General moves, we win. And every one of these, we have gotten court orders in our favor in days at the most, often within hours, saying that the Trump administration is breaking the law. We're in week 3 of the Trump administration. They've already violated the Constitution according to courts, violated other federal law, violated the rule of law more broadly. And so, unfortunately, we have to look ahead and see what else might be coming. We're looking at some of the potential action when it comes to sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. That's been projected through a couple of different memos, the Bove memo and the Bondi memo. We believe that those issues are not quite ripe, but could be ripe soon, meaning they're actionable by us in court shortly.
And that Bondi memo includes a notion that the Department of Justice should stop sending funds to jurisdictions that are not enforcing federal immigration law. That would include California and here in LA as well.
That would include California, cities in California, and we have gone through this issue and won already. It's in a direct and stark violation of a Ninth Circuit ruling that we secured during the Trump administration 1.0 that said it violates the 10th Amendment, which provides strong state rights for the federal government to condition funding on revocation of sanctuary status.
Well, you're monitoring all of this out of D.C., and I know you're working hard to monitor what's happening in L.A. when it comes to a lot of this rent gouging. You and I have talked about Penal Code 396, this provision for this time of crisis to not have rents increase by over 10%. And Attorney General, I have to tell you, I've had tenants' rights advocates here at this desk who say, we're crawling Zillow, and we're seeing what feel like thousands of instances of rent gouging. And of course, this is Zillow. It's not scientific. It's not a court of law. It's not legal. It's not true evidence in that sense yet. But they say they're not seeing that many prosecutions from your office and even more local prosecutors that would send a message to landlords. What do you say about what you're seeing, the number of prosecutions you have, and the state of the rent gouging that we're seeing in LA?
Yeah, we've been getting a lot of input evidence from the field of the possibility of rent gouging, and it's very concerning to us. We are adamant in our willingness to prosecute when a case is made. Zillow does not create a case that's ready for trial. You got to get the admissible evidence, you got to get the witness statements, you got to get good documentation and lock down the documentation for the price before the state of emergency was declared, the price after. That takes a little time. We've taken time in a number of specific cases. We brought the first prosecution, we brought the second prosecution, we did the investigation that led to the third prosecution in partnership with the LA City Attorney. We are the ones driving this. We are the ones going to court and doing the investigation and bringing prosecutions against those who violate the law. When we do bring a prosecution, it sends a message to the world. So this is all hands on deck, but we've actually brought prosecutions and are holding people accountable and doing so in a way that'll stand up in a court of law.
Well, I know there are folks in your department who have lost their homes, who are displaced, who are needing to find new places. So I know this is personal work for you in addition to legal work. And so I want to thank you for that on behalf of everyone here in Los Angeles, because there's a lot going on. And I know you're busy, so it means a lot that you came in and speak to all this so well. Really appreciate seeing you here.
It's my honor. I'll keep doing everything I can to fight for Angelenos and all Californians.
Well, we're honored to have you and have these conversations. Attorney General Rob Bonta, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And there you go. There's a lot going on here on a state level, as you can hear, and also in LA. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about for the rest of the show here on Inside the Issues. Stay with us. We have much more coming up.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage. And click the subscribe button here. You can also download our app and watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.